All right. Hey, everyone, especially all of you in Mr. Martin's classes. We were thinking about all of you the other day and how, well, let's be honest. Sometimes when you finish an assignment in class, your fingers might start itching for a little bit of, a game break, right? Maybe something classic like Tetris, just to fill the time.
Yeah, definitely. It's so tempting when you have a few minutes of downtime to just jump into something fun and engaging.
Exactly. And we get it. It's totally understandable. But we wanted to do a little deep dive today into what's actually happening in your brain when you make that switch from schoolwork to gaming, especially right there in the middle of class. We've been looking at some fascinating research on this, and, well, today's goal is really straightforward to give you the facts about how jumping between schoolwork and, say, a game on your computer affects your learning.
Right. And specifically, we want to tackle this question. If you've already finished your assignment and you have a few minutes, is it really harmless to play a little Tetris? I mean, on the surface, it seems pretty innocent, right? You've done what you were supposed to do.
Right, exactly. You've checked off all the boxes, got a few minutes to spare. Why not dive into that Tetris zone? But here's where things get really interesting. Research actually shows that when you're playing a game, your brain goes into a particular mode, kind of like shifting gears. And it turns out that to switch out of that gaming mode and back into the kind of focused logical processing you need for learning, well, it takes time. It's not an instant flip.
Yeah, and we're not just talking about a minute or two. Research indicates it can take around 15 minutes for your brain to fully transition from that gaming state back to being ready for serious learning.
15 minutes. Wow. Okay, so that quick Tetris break isn't so quick after all when you consider the mental transition time.
Exactly. And this 15-minute period, it isn't just about, deciding to pay attention again. It's an actual neurological process called cognitive set shifting. When you're gaming, certain neural pathways in your brain are firing away.
Hmm.
But to switch to focused learning, different pathways need to be activated. And this process of activating and deactivating these networks, it takes time. It's not instantaneous. So even a short Tetris session can leave you a little bit, well, mentally out of sync with what's happening in class.
That's fascinating. I never thought about it that way. So it's like your brain needs to catch up after being in that game zone. I mean, think about it this way. Have you ever quickly played a game in class and then tried to immediately refocus on what Mr. Martin was saying or jump into a new assignment? Did it feel like you could just snap back into focus mode?
Right. Or was there a kind of mental fog? Maybe things felt a little fuzzy for a few minutes. That's your brain still making that transition. And it's not just a feeling. There's hard data to back this up.
Oh, really? Tell me more.
So in the 2022 PISA study, which is this huge international assessment, a significant majority of U.S. students, we're talking about two-thirds, reported being distracted by digital devices during class time.
Two-thirds. Wow, that's a lot of divided attention going on in classroom.
Absolutely. And here's the really important part. Those students who said they were distracted by their devices scored, on average, 15 points lower in math compared to their peers who were able to stay focused.
15 points lower? That's a pretty big difference.
It is, and it can represent a substantial gap in understanding. It could be the difference between grasping a key concept and just feeling lost. And this isn't a small thing. It has a real impact on your grades. So even though that Tetris game might seem harmless, the data suggests it's actually costing you in terms of your learning.
Okay, so that's pretty convincing. But I know what some of you might be thinking right now. You're thinking, well, I'm actually pretty good at multitasking. I can listen to Mr. Martin and play at the same time, no problem. It's like, getting double the things done, right? Having fun while still absorbing what's going on in class. But hold on a second. Research has something interesting to say about that, too.
Yeah, multitasking is a bit of a myth for most people. The Cleveland Clinic actually states that only a tiny percentage, like 2.5% of people, can truly multitask effectively without their performance dropping in at least one of the tasks. For most of us, what we call multitasking is really just rapidly switching our attention back and forth between different.
So we're not actually doing both things simultaneously. We're just quickly jumping between them.
Gotcha. Right. And all that jumping around has a cost. The American Psychological Association found that this type of task switching reduces our productivity by about 40%. So think about that in terms of learning. If you're constantly going back and forth between a game and what Mr. Martin is teaching, you're essentially running your brain at a reduced capacity. You're not giving your full attention and therefore your best effort to either one.
Wow, 40%, that's a huge chunk of productivity lost. So it's really not as efficient as it feels, huh?
Not at all. It's like trying to listen to two people talking at the same time. You might catch bits and pieces of both conversations, but you're not fully understanding either one. And when you're trying to learn new and sometimes complex things in class, that full understanding is crucial.
Absolutely. And this doesn't just apply to those few minutes you might sneak in for a game during class, right? There's research using monitoring software that's actually tracked how students use their computers. And while the findings are pretty eye-opening, they found that a significant portion of the time, something like 42%, was spent on applications that had nothing to do with schoolwork.
42%. That's a lot of time that could be used for learning. When you look at that number, it really highlights the missed opportunity, right?
Exactly. It's what economists call opportunity cost. Think of all the things you could be doing with that time that would actually help you understand the material better. You could be reviewing notes, asking Mr. Martin clarifying questions, or maybe even getting a head start on the next assignment. Every minute you spend gaming is a minute you're not fully investing in your education.
It's all about recognizing that trade-off, what you're potentially missing out on when you choose to play games during class time. And remember, it's not just about avoiding distractions. It's about taking advantage of the opportunity to really learn and understand the material.
So, are you saying that playing games could actually be holding students back?
Well, there's some research that suggests that. A study found that young boys who had video game systems at home didn't progress academically as quickly as those who didn't. It wasn't that their grades necessarily went down, but they kind of stayed at the same level instead of improving over time.
Interesting. So it's not always about a dramatic drop in grades. It's more subtle, like a plateau in learning, right?
Precisely. Researchers call this the plateau effect. It's like getting stuck on a level in a game. You're not moving forward. Even if you're not failing, you're not reaching your full potential. And while gaming can be fun and relaxing outside of class, if you're doing it a lot, it might be preventing you from really excelling in your studies.
Okay, so we've talked about gaming in general, but let's talk specifically about Tetris. Why is this particular game so darn addictive?
Well, it's a master at creating a psychological state called flow. Have you ever been playing Tetris and suddenly realize that, like, an hour has gone by?
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's like you get in the zone and everything else just disappears.
Exactly. That's the flow state. You're totally engrossed, time flies by, the outside world fades away. And Tetris is designed to do this. The challenge of fitting those blocks, the increasing speed, the satisfaction of clearing lines, it all works together to capture your attention.
I see. So it's like Tetris is engineered to be super engaging.
Yes, and that's why it's so problematic in a classroom setting. When you're in that deep flow state with Tetris, it's like your brain has built a wall around that activity, and it becomes much harder to shift back to an academic mindset. Remember the 15-minute transition time we talked about? Well, after being in a Tetris flow state, it's probably going to take even longer for your brain to switch gears.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense. So even though it feels like a harmless way to kill a few minutes, it's actually creating this huge mental hurdle to get back to learning.
Absolutely. And here's a surprising fact. Researchers at the University of California, Riverside, found that Tetris is such a powerful distractor that it can even help reduce cravings in people who are dieting or struggling with addiction. Think about that. It's so good at grabbing your attention that it can override even strong urges. And while that might be helpful in those situations, it's definitely not what you want when you're supposed to be focusing on learning in class.
Right. You want your brain focused on Mr. Martin's lesson, not on those falling blocks.
Exactly.
So for a lot of students, playing a game like Tetris might just seem like a harmless way to fill time or avoid boredom. But as we've seen, there's a lot more going on beneath the surface.
Right. We tend to underestimate the cognitive cost of switching between tasks. Even if it feels like a quick and easy mental break, your brain is actually working hard to disengage from the game, reorient itself to the classroom, and then refocus on learning. It's not a seamless process, and it takes up valuable mental energy.
So if we take a step back and look at all the research, it's pretty clear that playing games like Tetris in class, even if you've finished your work, isn't as harmless as it might seem.
Yes, the evidence is quite compelling. It suggests that it disrupts your focus, affects your academic performance, makes it harder to learn new material, and might even slow down your overall academic progress.
But here's the important thing. This isn't about telling you what to do. We're not trying to be the fun police. The goal here is to give you the information, the knowledge about what's happening in your brain so you can make your own informed choices about how you use your computer time in Mr. Martin's class. Now that you know about that 15-minute transition time and how gaming can affect your learning, you're better equipped to decide what's best for you.
Exactly. And it brings up an important question for you to think about. Now that you understand these cognitive effects, what might be a more engaging and beneficial way to use that extra time you have in class after finishing your work?
Right. Instead of automatically going for that Tetris game, maybe there is a way you can actually use that time to boost your learning. Could you go over your notes again, maybe think of some questions for Mr. Martin, or perhaps even explore something related to the lesson that you find really interesting? Instead of hitting pause on learning, you could keep that momentum going. It's definitely something worth considering as you navigate your time in Mr. Martin's class.
I think that's great advice. Being mindful of how you use your time can make a real difference in your learning experience.
I agree. So, to all of you in Mr. Martin's classes, thanks for joining us for this deep dive. And remember, you have the power to make choices that will help you learn and grow.
That's right. It's all about making informed decisions. We hope this has given you some food for thought.
Absolutely. And until next time, happy learning,
So
everyone.
yeah,